The Airbus A321 XLR has finally received its type certification from the European Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA. This is the green light for the aircraft to enter service with Iberia later this year, and a huge milestone for the XLR project. We headed to the Farnborough Airshow to catch up with the test flight crew who fly this cutting-edge aeroplane. Here's what they had to say about what they do and where the XLR program is off to next.
Hello, my name is Malcolm Ridley. I'm the Chief Test Pilot at Airbus. Here at the display, my role is to handle the aeroplane.
Hi, I'm Mark Lewis. I'm an experimental test pilot at Airbus. I'm the second pilot on the display aeroplane, and back in Toulouse I'm doing a variety of different flight tests and some teaching.
Hi, I'm Philippe. I'm flight test engineer and lead flight test engineer for the A321 XLR company.
Hello, I'm Mehdi. I'm a test flight engineer, and especially I'm the test flight engineer for the first prototype XLR, MSN 11,000.
Great, so can you tell me, how do you, from sort of start to finish, how do you prepare to take an A321 to an air show and display it for a whole week? What does that look like?
So the key thing is, really, Chris, that we do it as a team. The people who are not here this morning are our ground team, so you're only seeing the part of our group. So in terms of the flight crew here, our job is to ensure that we select a good display profile that will really show the capability of the aeroplane nicely within the constraints that we have in terms of time and airspace. And then to prepare ourselves by practicing, and certainly for the pilots to decide how we're going to fly the display in terms of speeds, altitudes, etc. And I'll hand over to the rest of the team for their specialist parts in this.
There's a fair bit of preparation in terms of understanding all the rules and regulations for displaying an airplane at Farnborough. Farnborough is a busy urban area, so there are some special rules to keep everybody safe. So we do a lot of preparation together on revising and discussing all those things. And we practice in a simulator. We have a sim that we use to prepare the display. And we also do some live practices on the real airplane in the weeks leading up to the display, so that we're prepared.
So, as a flight test engineer, we have a little bit of things to prepare for the display, taking into account the performance of the aircraft, discussing it with the pilot. And then during the display itself, it's mainly about monitoring that everything goes well for the aircraft.
And for me, as a test flight engineer, I am in charge of the aircraft situation, aircraft configuration. So I am the link between the ground team and the flight team. And in order to be sure that the aircraft will be ready for the show, and during the display, I will monitor all the aircraft parameter system in order to have the pilot only focused on the flight display.
And last year we were very fortunate to talk to the crew showing the XLR at the Paris Airshow. I'm interested, are there any notable differences between how you guys have prepared for this show as opposed to that one?
Fundamentally, Chris, no. It's the preparation that we've just described applies anywhere we go. But we have to take into account the specific aspects of each show. The airspace is different, the limitations are different. We have to respect quite clearly the neighbourhoods around the airport to make sure we don't intrude. So each show is slightly different in terms of the constraints and the preparation we need to do. But fundamentally, the ethos is the same, and we have the same way of working.
Yeah, in terms of aircraft, there were a little bit differences because 1 year ago the aircraft was not certified, which just is now, and therefore the preparation that you need to do are slightly different because, of course, when you have an aircraft that is halfway into its development, it's not the same as an aircraft that is already certified.
Is it easier once it's certified, would you say?
Well, we have completed all the development parts, so now there's nothing that is open item anymore.
Certification is just the first step. In the forthcoming years, months and years, there'll be a rolling program of continuous improvement, which is the way Airbus approaches all of its programs. Even airplanes, if you go back to the A320 and A330 that first flew in the 1980s and 1990s, we're still rolling out continuous improvements to how the airplane operates and flies, to keep it fresh and up to date and competitive so that customers are happy with the airplane. We'll keep doing that with the XLR.
And by the way, we had the certification for the first engine type. The second engine type is coming soon, so the flight test campaign is not fully completed yet. It's a couple of months, weeks left.
And which engines does the aircraft you're displaying today have?
Today is CFM engine.
Are they the ones that's certified?
I started in the early 1980s as a pilot in the Royal Air Force, flew heavy aircraft, maritime patrol aircraft, then applied for the test pilot course, which I completed in 1996. So my path has been quite a traditional one, coming up through the military, through test pilot training in the military. And then I tested heavy aircraft for the Royal Air Force, became an instructor at the test pilot school in the UK, and then was fortunate enough to join Airbus 12 or so years ago. Now the paths are opening up a little bit in terms of how you can follow the path to become a test pilot. So there are more options available, and Mark can talk a little bit about those, I think.
So for me, I started in the 90s, like Mal in the RAF, on the Harrier aircraft in Germany initially, and then the same test pilot school, which is in Boscombe Down in the UK, the Empire Test Pilot School. And that's one of four schools, four mainstream schools that you can attend, usually as a military person, but you could be a civil servant, or you could even be sponsored by a private company to go through a year-long program of training. We've started to do that training ourselves actually inside Airbus. We have our own school called the Airbus Flight Test School. I'm responsible for that. And we take engineers from inside Airbus and we train them to be flight test engineers. So we take them into the airborne environment, so they apply their discipline and learn a broad range of skills so that eventually they can do production flight tests, and beyond that they can do some of the experimental developmental work that we need for new airplanes like the XLR.
It's worth stressing though that we're a multinational team in Airbus, and this group here, both the pilots happen to be British, English and Scottish on this particular trip, but the path has been very similar in France and the other Western nations so far.
And Malcolm, tell me, what does the Airbus chief test pilot actually do day to day?
I have the great pleasure to continue to fly. I remind my boss all the time that I still have pilot in the title, so I need to fly. But I have two major responsibilities. The first one is to ensure that the flight tests that we do are done to high quality and high safety. And that applies across the four different final assembly line test sites that we have, not only in France in Toulouse, but in Hamburg, Germany, Tianjin in China, and Mobile in Alabama, USA. So we need to ensure that what we do is safe, that we're doing it effectively and efficiently, and I have the ultimate responsibility for that, along with our safety team. We have a safety management system in flight test that ensures that we follow the correct techniques for safety and that we have a good reporting system. The other part of my job is to ensure that what we call the technical voice, if you like, the results that we draw from our flight tests, the conclusions that we make, the recommendations that we make, and also our thoughts about how aircraft should develop in the future, that all of those things are projected up through the company with the necessary authority. So that's the other part of my job, is the technical voice of our flight test team.
So hello, I'm Mehdi Zedoun, test flight engineer, especially the test flight engineer of the first XLR prototype MSN 11000.
And I'm Philippe Pupin, I'm flight test engineer, and I was in charge of the A321 XLR flight test campaign. So first of all, we need to work together quite closely, because we have to build up links that are necessary for the good behavior of the campaign. And so the flight test engineer discusses a lot in terms of preparation of the flight test with the design office in order to be aware of the exact condition of what we are going to test prior going into the aircraft. The flight test engineer prepares and discusses a lot with the design office, goes to the simulator together with the pilot, sometimes with the test flight engineer as well, in order to repeat the flight. And once we know exactly what we want to do, the role of the flight test engineer is to write down in a test order what we are going to do and how we are going to do it.
The test flight engineer, compared to the flight test engineer, it is an engineer who became a flight test engineer. The test flight engineer was a flight engineer who became a test flight engineer. So the flight engineer, it was in the past, you remember, the cockpit with 3 crew members. But now we have no more flight engineer on the aircraft. Airbus was one of the first manufacturers to remove the third crew members, this third crew member, but in flight test we are still using this third man. The test flight engineer in Airbus is in charge of the aircraft since the beginning of the life of the aircraft up to the end of the flight test campaign. We are taking into account the aircraft configuration. We are performing all the ground test and the flight test in close loop with the FTE. So FTE is requesting a specific configuration of the aircraft. We are taking care that the aircraft is in the good shape. And during the flight, we are between the two pilots and we are monitoring all aircraft system, taking care and participating to some specific test that needs to be free in the cockpit. So it's specific training, specific license. In French, we said MNE, mécanicien navigant d'essai. And Airbus is still using this third crew member. And for the FTE is in the flight test installation.
So I'm sitting in the back in the cabin, and the role of the FTE in flight is a complementary role to what Mehdi has just explained, in the sense that at the flight test engineer station we've got access to many parameters which are not normally displayed in the cockpit. So it allows us to make sure that we have been doing the maneuver with the appropriate precision and nothing that has been perturbating or upsetting the measurement that we were doing. That is not always obvious from a cockpit point of view. So we can declare the test point is valid or not from there, in coordination with the telemetry as well, because the flight test engineer is in contact with telemetry and has the possibility to discuss about the test point and the correct assessment of the aircraft.
And maybe we can give one example. If you are performing takeoff performance flight with one engine out, in case of any issue, pilot will hide the aircraft, trajectory, safety. The test flight engineer will relight the engines, and the flight test engineer will be at the back monitoring all the aircraft parameters.
And the good stability of the point.
And the good stability of the plane.